Hi, I'm Tone Lanzillo, and welcome to Climate Duluth. It's a great pleasure to have as my guest today Gary Boelhower, who actually I've known for a while. I must share this. I joined Loaves and Fishes 3 years ago, and I'm a live-in volunteer at the Dorothy Day House. And I remember the first time Gary and his partner Gary brought dinner to us and did not know either gentleman. And during the conversation, I heard about one Gary who was a poet and a professor, and the other Gary that was a city councilman. So I was very intrigued as both a musician myself and having worked in city government to get to know these two gentlemen. And it's been a real pleasure to get to know both of them during my 3 years here in Duluth. So thanks for coming, Gary. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. Why don't we just simply start with where did your love for poetry begin? Yeah.
Yeah, well, my love for poetry began very early in my life. I like to say that poetry saved me because in kindergarten and first grade, I wasn't doing too well. I actually ran away from kindergarten one day, and then in first grade, one of the teachers put on my report card, "Doesn't play well with others."
Really?
So I was on the downward slope, as they say.
Wow, okay.
But in second grade, I had a teacher who, I don't know, somehow asked me to recite a poem. And I recited a poem for the class that my father loved, that he would often recite at home. And it opened up things for me. The next day, after reciting that poem, she asked me to recite it again for the third and fourth grade class. And so that became one of the ways in which I felt comfortable and contributing in the world. And,
Wow.
and from that point on, language and the creation of stories and poems became very important to me.
Wow. Over the years, what has been several of your most memorable experiences, either in writing poetry or sharing poetry with others in your life? Can you think of a few? Or?
Yeah, certainly my experience early in my childhood, throughout my childhood really, much of my poetry comes out of nature, comes from a deep appreciation with nature. And yet, my first published poem was in the Wisconsin Historical Society magazine.
Okay.
And the poem was about paper mills, because I lived in Kimberly, Wisconsin, where Kimberly-Clark Company had one of its first paper mills.
Oh,
and
okay.
so I wrote this poem about paper mills, and it was published when I was, I think, in seventh grade.
Wow.
So that was one of the, whenever you can see your material in print, in a magazine or a book, you know that in some way it's making its way out there in the world and having some kind of impact. And often we don't know what that impact is, but occasionally we get a story. A few years ago, I had a book at one of the galleries in Two Harbors, and the person at the gallery called me up one day and said, "I just want you to know that somebody was in and picked up your book, and they were reading a poem in the store, and they said out loud, 'Nobody has ever experienced before this feeling that I've been having.'" And they were able to identify with my experience in the poem. It was a person who was undergoing chemotherapy, and it's just a powerful experience, right?
Wow.
And so every once in a while you get those stories of somebody who's able to connect with a particular poem, and it gets them into their own experience in a deeper way. It helps them understand that, you know, I'm not in this alone. There's other people who've had this experience. And
Wow.
so, yeah.
That's phenomenal. You did mention your, as a young age, your connection, your interest in nature. But to follow up with that, your interest in the environment, climate change, and combining it with writing poetry, how has that evolved over time for you? Yeah.
So my poetry has always been deeply, deeply grounded in the natural world.
Okay.
This experience, this deep experience of wonder, and it seems to me that our motivation to show up in these days with action for the climate, for our planet, really depends upon some kind of relationship, right? I mean, we have to know that, that our life is inextricably connected with this life of the planet. And unless we have that experience of relationship, of often, I think, from my perspective, an experience of wonder, of the mystery, of the beauty, of the preciousness of this land, of this water, of this air, you know, of this planet. When we have that experience, then we naturally come to this place of, so let's keep it superior. You know, let's keep it beautiful.
Right.
Let's keep it precious, so that we can continue to enjoy this relationship.
Right.
And we know it. You know, at these days, it's the relationship is tenuous,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it
Yeah.
really is. And so, more and more, we need to take time, I think, to be in nature and to reaffirm, reconnect in our relationship with the
Right.
planet. Yeah.
Yeah. As you speak, I can tell by the look in your face and the look in your eyes how important and meaningful this work is to you. I can see it.
Well, you know, I'm driving an electric car these days,
Okay.
and I just signed a contract to put solar panels on my roof. You know, we have to come to the point where we're taking significant actions in our lives in order to protect this planet.
Right.
I'm getting my milk in returnable bottles at the co-op, and you know,
Wow.
planting the garden, expanding the garden, purchasing things locally, all of that. I mean, there's so many ways in which each of us, no matter, you know, where we are on
Right.
the economic spectrum, we can all take important actions, I think,
Right.
to have this planet here for my kids and my grandkids
Yeah.
and my great-grandkids.
I admire that because when I moved to Duluth 3 years ago, some decisions I made when I came here, actually November of 2017, as I decided to no longer drive or own a car. I decided to no longer fly. I take the bus and train when I travel. And I decided to get rid of a lot of my electric toys, TVs and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now I tell people that I try to live a smaller and slower life,
Right.
which I think probably sustains me more. But yeah, I admire that. Yeah, that you're one of those individuals that's making and taking it personal in moving forward. I really appreciate that. What or who inspires you?
Wow.
Whether as a teacher, a poet,
Yeah.
a member of this Duluth community, but yeah, where does your inspiration come from?
Well, my inspiration certainly comes from many other poets who have a similar kind of connection to nature, connection to our planet.
Right.
I think of the late Mary Oliver, you know, who was dear, dear inspiration for me. And
Really? Wow.
yeah, I loved every one of her books. And over and over again, I mean, for years and years and years, and book upon book, she was able to see, really see the world, you know, and that's the key, I think, for poetry and for all of us, right?
Right.
That we see the world in its beauty, in its depth, and then we can respond to that. So Mary Oliver, for all of these years, has been a major inspiration,
Right.
and there are so many poets within our Duluth community that have been inspirations for me. Sheila Packard, Deb Cooper, and on and on. I mean, I could name many, Ryan
Right.
Vine, and on and on. People who, you know, are doing the service of writing.
Right.
We don't make much money on poetry these days, but
A lot of us are artists in that situation,
you know,
right?
but we still do it.
Right.
Why do we do it? Because you know, we can't help ourselves. Because we have to tell the story of our relationship, and so many people are continuing to write, to read, to share, and it fills me up and gives me inspiration to go on.
Right.
My own grandkids as well are a deep inspiration to me.
Okay.
Had a wonderful experience just a few weeks ago of spending a couple of days with our 2-year-old granddaughter.
Okay.
And 2-year-olds are constantly in a state of wonder. They're constantly in a state of learning, you know, until they collapse and sleep. But, you know, but the rest of the day, it's like everything is new, you know, and they'll do the same thing 30 times over because it's still new and they're still learning. And it's just so powerful to see that learning happen before your eyes, that
Right.
development, that sense of inquiry, that wanting to touch everything and taste everything. And boy, what a way to live, right? I mean, in many ways, to live fully means to have that kind of sense of inquiry and constant learning.
Right. Wow. It's amazing you mentioned Mary Oliver, because I have to be honest, about 6 months ago, a member of our Loaves and Fishes community sent me a poem by Mary Oliver. And so it was 6 months ago I began reading Mary Oliver.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your comments from the number of poems I've read by her in the past 6 months. While we're here today, and I'm really happy to see this, I would love for you to share some poetry or books you want to highlight. So, yeah,
Sure, I would love to.
sure.
This is my latest little book, Step Close In. It's a poetry chapbook, and it's really focused on the labyrinth experience, walking every day. And the poem at the very end of this book is a poem that in many ways takes its inspiration from indigenous peoples across our land who've been here, you know, centuries and centuries and centuries before us.
Right.
There's this understanding in the indigenous community of all my relations, right? That we are connected to everything else. We're related to everything else.
Okay.
Everything else on our planet is part of our family. And I
Okay.
think there's a sense in which we need to recover that perspective, that, you know, rocks and trees and the lake, and those aren't just things.
Right.
Those are realities that are part of our family, and we're related to them, all my relations.
Okay.
Let the sole of the foot step softly to meet the world. Let the face tilt upward and open toward the sun. Let the arms stretch out in the ancient gesture of all winged things. Let the hands cup the flowing air as a deep swimmer in the ocean of all things possible. Let us say together in the one language of breath, all my relations. Let us step quietly over the boundaries we have created to divide us, the imaginary borders on our maps, lot lines, plot lines, zoning codes. Let us choose to forget the long litany of exclusion, nations, states, colors, genders, tribes, species. Let us say together in the one language of breath, all my relations.
I have to thank you for sharing that, and I'll share a secret why that poem means a lot to me. In my 3 years here, there's been some moments where I was trying to discern whether to stay in Duluth or move, and some other decisions with family. And there's a group of 3 trees, they're all together in the lake walk, that on probably 5 occasions I've gone to these 3 trees and sat there and contemplated or meditated what to do. So I really appreciate that poem, because I feel like those 3 trees, I have a relationship with those trees.
Yeah.
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 So thank you. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah,
Continue.
okay.
Yeah, this is great.
Here's a poem about called Earth, and again you'll hear some of the same things in here. But again, this is about reconnecting in our relationship with the earth, understanding that we are inextricably connected to it, that our life depends upon it, that our well-being depends upon it. So this is as if the earth is speaking, right?
Okay.
I've been pieced, platted, fenced, plowed, hectared, acred, measured by miles, named, renamed in another language and another language, mantra of mine, 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 tantrum of a 2-year-old. I do not belong to you. You belong to me, to this place, this wild river where you whisper your prayers, this grove of birches where you carve your names in promises, this prairie of buffalo and horses that teach you to believe in the music of hooves upon the land, this granite ridgeline like the backbone of an ancient creature dreaming under a blanket of silken stars, this blade of grass running the sun through its veins, cycling bright life into rot and ruin and resurrection. Draw your maps, name your towns and cities, lay down your calculated connections of concrete, striped with rules and bordered with billboards praising your idols. Launch your rockets and orbit your satellites, and then look upon me from afar, from the outer emptiness of space, and know again the ground of your becoming. Know again the spinning wet story of your body, your belonging. We belong here. This is where we belong. This is the place we call home, not because we've earned it, not because we've done something to deserve it. It's a precious, precious gift. It is the place of our belonging. And until we recognize that, we're not going to do what we gotta do to make this place clean and livable again.
It's amazing. And as you know, we didn't talk about the poems you're going to select today, but that poem resonates with me because last April I chose to walk from Philadelphia to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And it was a walk to reflect on the climate and the environment. And when I came back, I wrote a piece that it was my observation that we were very disconnected from the earth and from the planet in so many ways. So thank you. That definitely resonates with me also. So thank you. Yeah.
Well, one of certainly the most beautiful places in the world is Duluth, right? Because we've got this amazing lake that we live next to that has a palpable presence in our lives. It certainly does for me.
Right.
It reflects our moods from day to day.
Right.
And so you can't, I don't think a poet can live in Duluth without writing a few poems about Lake Superior. So here's one.
Okay.
Lake Superior. Days on end, this lake is a gray lady of grief, lifeless and brooding, sighing a litany of lamentations. And other days, she's sparkling, sequined every color, shining silver and jewels, a soaring descant of desire. Perhaps she mimics us, no more or less than a mirror for our most extravagant longings and our unfaithful despair. But not our mirror alone. Come the dawn, she takes the light, and oh, the dance she does. She lifts the light and shakes it. Her whole body shivers and delights. Every fluid syllable filled with luminescence. Every cell a refraction of praise. So that's what I mean about wonder. You know, it's like the beauty, the precious beauty of this world we live in. When you have that experience, you want to have it again. You want to go back and be sure to see that sunset one more time, or that sunrise, whatever it might be. Yeah.
A little scary here because that poem also resonates with me because I live on the 3rd floor of the Dorothy Day house, and in my space I have one window, and that window looks out on the lake and the bridge. And I've often told my sisters that window on some days sustains me. Whether
Yes.
it's a difficult day at the house or I'm struggling with a climate project, and yes, Lake Superior has been one of the draws that's probably kept me here. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I see the book. I remember when I bought that book, you and I met you at the Peace Church for some kind of arts and crafts fair.
Aha.
And I
Yeah.
remember the day I shook your hand and picked up that book, and I've had it ever since. Yeah, it's still at Dorothy Day.
Yeah, so this is my latest full collection of poetry, this being the latest little small chapbook. But Naming Rights was published in 2017. And here again, you'll see the precious relationship with the earth that is so critical to my understanding and my being. This is called In the Silence. Footsteps crunch on the cold snow, heavens full of falling mercy. The big arms of the pine spread in prayer, shawled in white, the whole everyday machine muffled. If everyone could say their name in such silence, we might hear. Each one might send their small swirl of hopes and prayers spiraling out like Sufi robes in the dervish dance, and we might all hear each other's hands rise up, and we would know the one world's song. All our rituals are attempts at listening. All our songs a preparation for emptiness, when our words have all fallen away because we know we are all whirling together. Wherever you are, However you do it, notice how we are all whirling together in the great round dance on this tiny rock with fire in its soul, through the grand galaxies spinning, spinning with mercy and wonder.
I would like to ask, in the little time we have left, I know you brought a special book with you today that I think you wanted to talk about. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about this book you brought today.
So, this is my latest, A Common Thirst. It's a children's book. And, after writing for adults for so many years, I'm realizing more and more that this message of connection to the earth and our responsibility to share the resources of the earth is something that we have to learn at a very, very early age. Or maybe children already know it, but we have to reaffirm it in ways for them, in language for them. And so A Common Thirst talks about the sheep and the goats who live in different regions. The goats live on the high mountains, and the sheep live in the valleys below. And they all, they have all the water they need. The waters are running down the mountains because of the melting snow, and they're meandering through the valleys because there's rain. And yet there comes a year when no rain falls, when no snow falls. And the goats from the mountains journey down the mountains, hoping that the sheep on the plains might have water and food to share. And the sheep journey toward the mountains, hoping that maybe the goats have water and food to share. They meet in the foothills, that place that is kind of foreign to both of them. And they realize as they come together, by looking at their scrawny bodies and glazed eyes, that neither of them have water or food. They rather share a common thirst. But they're afraid of each other. They've been separate from each other. They've seen each other as living in different kingdoms, and so they separate themselves and they camp in their individual camps apart from each other. But late at night, the young ones can't stay silent. They're too curious, and they come out from the camp and they come face to face with each other, and they begin to tell their stories. They begin to ask questions of each other. And they go to a cave where they can rest and continue their storytelling. As they enter the cave, one of them, their hoof, goes in between a couple of rocks, and there's a splash. And they know there's water, and they cry out, "Water, water!" And, of course, the adults come rushing, and they separate them out again. And the king of the goats says, "This is our water because it is at the foot of the mountains." And the sheep, the queen of the sheep, says, "No, this is our water because it's at the edge of the plains." And they argue and argue until the youngest goat collapses. And the king of the goats says, "Move away, we will protect this young goat and allow him to drink from this water." And the youngest goat lifts up his head in weakness and says, "I will not drink this water until we all drink it. I will not drink this water because it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to all of us. We all have stories. We all have dreams. We all have thirst." And they share the common life, which we are called to share.
Thank you, Gary. I want to thank you for being here today. This is Yeah, I really appreciate this short time with you, and I look forward to working with you next week on the Climate Arts Project. And to all of you out there, thank you for joining us today. I look forward to seeing you again, and take care.